Welcome, Paul Bond, to my podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
So you're calling in from Costa Rica.
I am, yeah, at the edge of the rainforest. My wife and I moved down here a little over 3 years ago now. And I still exhibit around in Orange County in Hawaii. But yeah, this is where I do my thing.
Well, I remember watching you because we've been friends for a long time and kind of collegial spaces and the painting scene down here in South Orange County.
Mhm.
And we've had some really good conversations, but mostly I feel like I've followed your story more than fully interacted with it. So I
Mhm.
remember you were building a house in Costa Rica. Was that during the pandemic?
Yeah, it was. We started building right when the pandemic hit and Costa Rica closed their borders. And so we couldn't get in for 8 months. So if you weren't a Costa Rican citizen or you didn't have residency here, you couldn't come in. So we started building, or we signed a contract with the builder and they closed the borders. He's like, well, what do you want to do? And we're like, let's just keep going. This whole experience of Costa Rica has been all intuition. It's been all guided because we inherited the property. We inherited the money to build the house. All the doors opened for us. We found a great builder. We, on a whim, put up our house in San Clemente for sale. We put it at a very high price, thinking, okay, if this house sells, that's our sign to go. And of course, it sold in 24 hours. So everything, like the stars, totally aligned. And that's how we knew we weren't running from anything. It was just, this was the next logical thing for us. So the building happened without us even being here. We weren't able to step inside the house during the course of the build. And it was like total trust. And it worked out beautifully. All the people came together that we needed to come together to help make it happen.
Weren't you guys out there like hacking away with machetes in the
Yeah.
field? And then the next thing you knew, you had an infinity pool.
Right. That's kind of how it happened, right? We sort of phoned it in.
And you were going to
So
use it as an Airbnb or something.
which
Yeah.
we did. We did for 2.5 years or so, and it worked out great. But little by little, we started spending more time here, and that's when we made a decision. Let's live here. Let's come live here for a while and just see. It felt like a good time in our lives to have that experience. And, me being an artist, my wife being a coach and doing retreats and consulting work, it's something we were able to do from here. And
Mm.
so, yeah, I miss California. I miss it a lot.
Yeah.
But we still come back. We still come back and forth.
It's not too far, right?
No, it's actually, if you draw a line straight from where we are, you're in Chicago. It's like 2 hours to Florida, but it's, 5.5 hours to San Diego or LA.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah, you forget how big South America
yeah,
is. Too.
yeah, but no,
Well,
it's not that far. We can be home in a day, 2 days, if we need to.
I sure hope
Yeah.
I get to visit down there one day.
We have 3 extra bedrooms here at our
All
house.
right.
So, all right.
It's happening for me too now. You're magic. Well, I wanted you to be on this podcast because I love your art and I want to talk about your process. So I've been asking you all year and you've been busy doing different things. We finally got this time and you had commented on a card that I shared earlier in the year, probably around Day of the Dead time.
Mm,
And you wrote back about it. And I'm going to pull that up right now and we'll talk about it.
yes.
So for those who are watching, you'll be able to see this hopefully. And for others, we will try to describe it. So tell me what you see. What is it about this card that visually you could describe?
It was actually what you wrote that caught my attention.
Maybe I should read it first then. Sinus serenum. Grief is the growing up of the heart that bursts boundaries like an old skin or a finished life. This is by Adrienne Marie Brown.
Mm,
Though we don't like it, grief is necessary to spiritual growth. It gets more potent as we get older, and each new heartache echoes previous losses in our Grand Canyon of the heart. Life is life, complete in it all, tragedy, comedy, love, and loss. When we first think of the word grief, we often think of the sorrow after a loved one dies. In some ways, the death of our loved one initiates us into a path toward understanding loss. But grief isn't limited to an end-of-life experience. It works on many levels. We can also grieve a love that disappears, a darling pet, our expectations over a dream long held and disappointed, the unquantifiable damage done through abuse. We can even grieve our attachments to those who are right in the room with us. Grief is a spectrum, so there is no need to compare pain here. If you bypass any loss to your psyche, you will have to pay emotional taxes on your grief later. It's the math of the heart. Balances must be paid. Although we dread the pain of loss and hold on to our resistance as long as we can, often well past its time, there's an alchemy to grief. This stage is magical too, as it allows us to let go of the past and invite us into the new. Grief allows us to look and feel deeply into the way things were and are. Life is limited, and the feelings of loss are part of our human experience, just as important as every other stage. Grief is a necessary threshold, sometimes a long one, but this isn't about quantity, this is about quality. This is part of the human experience, so don't let it isolate you for too long. You're not alone. If anything, our unique approach to the pain and resilience of loss is what makes us the most human of all. If you have any loss that still affects your waking mind, this is an invitation to make space for it. Grief is a meeting of honor. Approach this bridge from your most gentle, kind place, and you will be met with the same.
That's what got me. And when I came across this card that you had shared, I'm still reading or kind of going back through a book called The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Francis Weller. He's a psychotherapist, but he deals primarily with grief. But I don't know how long he's been doing it now, but he creates grief rituals that he leads himself, but he also trains other people to do. And when I came across his work, it moved me so deeply because I'm realizing more and more that every one of us is holding on to some level of grief. And for most people, it's weighing them down in some way because they don't know how to process it, or they don't even know there's a grief of being held. And one of the things he says is, there's no one in our lives that we will meet that isn't going to experience a loss or hasn't. Nobody. Every single human is going to have some kind of loss, and usually a profound one.
Yeah, because it doesn't feel like loss if it's not something you love.
Yeah, and you said this in your writing, that it's not just about losing a spouse or a partner or a parent or a child, that there's different pockets of grief, and one of them is the grief of what we expected but did not receive. In his analysis, that starts at birth because as humans, we're still hardwired for tribal village life, and we expected to be born into a village where 40 pairs of eyes greeted us, and parents and grandparents and great grandparents and aunts and uncles are going to raise us in this village. And now we're being raised maybe two parents if we're lucky, maybe a little extended family, but not much anymore. That's kind of like the original grief that we come into this lifetime with. And then there's the grief of the loss of the planetary ecosystem. There's the grief of the loss of democracy. There's, name it. Now there's this global grief happening with, warfare that we're watching from afar, and we're grieving for other people.
I have a question though. Why do you think that some people relate to this in grief, like what you're saying, and some people don't relate to it as grief?
It's a good question. And I'm not sure I know the answer to that, other than I think regardless of what you call it, the experiences of these losses or what we expected and never received, whatever that capacity is. And even it could be like we expected something from one or both of our parents growing up. They didn't parent us because they didn't know how or whatever. And so he kind of puts all this under the umbrella of grief. But I think it's still a feeling that we carry. And some people identify and know it as grief, and other people it's just an unnamed sadness that lives in our being, that for most people, it's there till we die.
And when we say we, we're talking about Western American people.
Yeah.
Middle,
Right.
we're talking about grief because we've learned that it's an important thing to talk about, probably
Mhm.
because we don't think it's talked about enough.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why we feel our grief more. Not that we feel it
Yeah.
more deeply, that maybe we look at it as something you're supposed to feel. Like, okay, this is part of my responsibility. It's to feel, or
Yeah.
maybe I feel a little extra, and some of it's not even my business, but you have
Yeah.
transpersonal empathy And also,
Mm-hmm.
you see how not grieving certain things or grieving them incorrectly and changing the stories around them.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the artists in us, the people who are looking for patterns and they're trying to solve their own angst that
Mm,
start to look for, where is that thing that I recognize in myself that no one else is recognizing? Oh, it's in the cemetery. Nobody's
mm,
visiting the cemetery. What about those poor people that aren't being visited? We think a little
yeah.
differently about these energies, whereas some people just go bury the dead, they're gone. And we're all like, but
Right.
wait, we haven't fully grieved. They haven't told their
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah. Dovetailing with that. And I think what you're saying too is in the last, let's say in the last 100 years, 150 years, how we are as a society has shifted dramatically, whereas in towns and villages and tribes, grieving was a very public, common thing, right?
In Jewish religion, that's something that our Jewish friends still practice, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I think in a very healthy way,
I do too.
and grief was shared by a community. And now it's like people start choking up around something they're talking about or grief. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. They're apologizing for their grief, and
Grievances.
grievances. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that. But then you carry the weight, right? The grief comes from I don't know if it's the Greek word of gravity, gravitas, it's a heaviness. And what excites me about this work, and I haven't done one yet, but I'm studying to lead a grief ritual. I'm going to just experiment with it. And I'm learning it doesn't have to be complicated. People just need a container of others with them to hold their grief. That's, I think, why many people don't grieve. So that you can't be the griever and the container for the grief at the same time. That's where the community comes in to help you hold that, grief and then release it as a group.
Nice
And
to see a male doing this too.
I'm realizing that I have my own share of grief. I've lost a parent that felt like he died too young, but my dad was in his 80s. He had a full, beautiful
It's
life,
too young when there's love there, isn't there?
Yeah, it felt like too young to me. I thought he's me around another 10 years or more. But, I have grief from relationships that were lost. There's any number of things that I'm realizing as we evolve as humans, as we go through this evolutionary phase, and I think we're hyper evolving now. Everything breaking down is making way for a really quick, historically speaking, evolutionary shift that we're going through. But I think releasing our griefs, our sadnesses, and our heaviness is a key thing to moving into this new enlightenment. I really do feel like we're moving into an age of enlightenment. It looks ugly right now, but
Is the key word, right?
moving, yes.
Moving towards.
Yeah. And
You
some are there. I
think so
encounter
too.
people who are pretty enlightened.
It's always like this. If you look back in history, there's a lot of fascist clampdown. And I mean, this is
Hmm.
not the first end of the world that we've been in.
Yeah.
Apocalyptic times have happened since
And they're usually followed by a flowering of culture, right?
the flowering that comes between the wars.
I like that. I hadn't heard that. Yes.
I think that happened like in the
Yeah.
1920s.
Mhm.
That was between wars. And
Right.
even in World War II, in America, we weren't really hit so hard, but men were sent away and the women went into the factories and did the men's work and they were able to, and they did it with gusto. And they found a lot of like, I think it was great to be a part of the whole thing, be part of
Yeah.
unity. Then they came back and they're like, you know what? The men are going to take the jobs and you're going to get a vacuum cleaner for Christmas.
Right. There wasn't fully equitable.
But my point
But
is, I like to remember those cycles of spark, and we're in the year of the snake, so it's really helpful. That's such an alchemical symbol too. The snake
beautiful. Yeah.
comes back around, bites its tail, but it also sheds its skin, and we're moving into the year of the horse. Actually,
In Chinese.
if you think of a snake being close to the earth and the rebirth and the old and the shedding and the new, and it's just the
Yeah.
constant grieving, dying process
Yeah.
in life, and it's
Yeah.
exhausting. And
It
yes,
is. Yeah.
we also know there'll be that spark because we've gone through those
Yeah.
sparks as well.
Well, I hope, and I think if you look at, I don't know, I think even astrology, or I don't know what you're seeing. I know like Richard Rudd talks about this a lot, that we're moving into these cycles have been pretty short. between wars, the flowering between wars,
Mhm.
and then there's another war pretty quickly, and then there's another down. I listen to him with Donna a lot, that we are moving into a bigger, more profound, longer period of, I use golden age for lack of a better term. He's probably got a different term for it.
I see it. I see it. Because other people say that. They said that in astrology, your time of great change, 2027. We just went through Pluto return in America, which is other, what are they? Empires. That's when it falls. It's
Mhm.
the end of the empire. And then something
Yeah.
else comes in. But I see it
Yeah.
as because I'm a parent of a neurodivergent daughter in more neurodivergent ways, I believe, than I am. She's on the spectrum, and what came in the testing, which is so profound to me, was that she cannot recognize hierarchy.
Mm.
Makes
Interesting.
living in the world really hard. It makes
Yeah.
living at home really hard as a teenager because, or even as a baby, it was hard for her because she was like, "Why is everyone treating me like a baby?"
So how did that translate with you as her parent? Because as a parent, you kind of, the hierarchy,
Yeah,
you're the
I know. I'm
authority.
like, I'm the mom. But yeah, she's like, yeah, you're the mom and I'm the daughter and we're equal. You know,
Yeah,
it's
that's
like,
fascinating.
I didn't grow up in a family system like that. Most of us didn't. And yet
Yeah.
that's why I think things are changing. I see it through the eye of my role as a mom. How do I help these kids
Mm.
get to the next, how do I keep them alive?
Yeah.
There's a lot of grief that they're born with. Like, how did I get to this planet? Everybody's so stupid. Why are they still doing things like this? And we're like, what do you mean? It's like they were born too early. And I think that my husband, he was kind of futuristic too. They're all futuristic. I'm the one that's like, always call myself Jacob Marley. Like I'm just bringing in all the chains of the ancestors with us. I do feel that as you learn about like the telepathy tapes, if you listen to that podcast, I think you'd
Mhm.
really enjoy it. It's about nonverbal autistic kids. And there's all these studies on them and all kind of saying the same thing. A lot of them are saying the same thing. Now that they're learning to communicate through technology, they're
Mhm.
saying how they all go to a hill of consciousness and get answers.
That's really fascinating because I'm dipping my toe in the AI world with regards to the visual AI world. And someone that I follow he's my teacher essentially. He essentially says that the purest form of the AI world is a tool for us to communicate with our higher selves. And like that rings true for me.
Right? Use it
Anything,
that way would be a very high-minded way to use it.
yeah. And if everything in our existence is all of God, if it's all neutral, then it's like we get to assign the meaning, the value of it. And so, um, what you said was very interesting because people are using it as a crutch for sure. But I think there are people who are pulling things of a higher nature. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it might be an interesting thing for grief rituals. I
Yeah.
want to get back onto talking about
Okay.
grief is
Yeah.
actually doing the workshops sound really, really cool. And I tried to do some grief workshops for a little while, but one thing that we did, and this is very crafty, but we took a shoebox and kind of collaged it with images that spoke to you
Mhm.
about maybe something in your life that you were wanting to honor. And then we found things and filled the shoebox and were able to just kind of put it away. And if we ever wanted to look at it, you could open it and look at it and then close it back up and put it away because I think with grieving, we're so quick to say, let it go.
Mhm.
Just let it go.
Yeah.
You need peace. Have a ritual. And the rituals do help because they witness.
Yeah.
But some things we can't have a ritual around, a public ritual around, because it might have been somebody who, think of someone who they died of AIDS, for example. And it was something that maybe their lover hadn't made peace with publicly. And
Mhm.
until they could do that, they had this secret of this thing, but they should still be able to grieve their thing, even
Yeah.
if they weren't
Yeah.
able to do it publicly. And so we can find little ways to sort of honor the relationship until you are ready to let it go. Because a lot of times we don't
Yeah.
know what we're really letting go of.
Yeah. And you said something really interesting that a lot of people feel like they have to release their grief. And there's a great podcast with Anderson Cooper. I don't know if you've come across it, called All That There Is. And it's all about grief. And he's interviewing people with his mom. Yeah. And his brother died. His brother committed suicide in front of his mom, like jumped off a building, like
Ugh,
heavy, heavy stuff. And his father died very young. And he was interviewing, I'm forgetting the actor's name, Garfield. I'm forgetting his first name.
Andrew
Really,
Garfield. Yes, I
Andrew
saw that
Garfield.
interview. I love him.
Yeah. And Andrew Garfield said, I hope this grief is always with me because
Mm.
it's proof of the love that I have. He was talking about his mother in that instance. So it's, yeah, these grief ceremonies and rituals, I think, are less about releasing our grief, but I think there is like some releasing, like steam, like letting steam out of a machine that's built up pressure. But it's also about blessing it and witnessing it and honoring it. So it's a very different way to look at it. We're not just trying to get over it. We're witnessing it and making an altar of it.
Gravitas. We're bringing it in
Yeah.
as a strength.
Yes.
And
Right. Yeah. We're taking that gravitas and carrying it forward into new areas of our life that we can move forward into, that maybe that grief might have been inhibiting us at some point.
I'm thinking of the actors, or, in your case, the artist, hopefully in my case also. Speaking of AI, I see a lot of really cool images, but I don't feel the gravitas from them.
Mm.
I do
Right.
when I see it made by a human hand. And it doesn't even have to be, I mean, digital can still have that. But there's
Mhm.
something about the time and the process of it that comes from someone that is working something out emotionally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or even if they don't know they're working it out, it's part of their practice to let that
Yeah.
out. And it
Yeah.
keeps them sensitive. And I think that's, where our grief serves us. We're able to move with it and make something, hopefully, that brings
Yeah.
life back in. And it makes me think of, like, when people cremate their loved one, there's all kinds of different things you can do now, right? You don't have to just throw it off a ship. You can
Hmm.
just, you can have a diamond made out of it. I gave of the ashes to Vernon's family in England as well. His sister took a little bit of it, and I think she had it put into a little necklace. She didn't need a lot of them. She just wanted a little. I think his parents put some in the tree outside their house. And yeah, it's like you're transforming it and turning it into something new that can be shared.
Yeah. I like what you're saying. And I think going back to the AI piece of it, the AI, the visual AI, people creating images, there are some cool images being created, but they feel kind of hollow, right? Because if you're not then creating, and the times that I've used it up till now are like, I have a vision in mind of a painting I want to create. I do some sketches, but I can't find an elephant that's sitting at the right angle that I want an elephant to be. And I don't know enough about elephant
Right.
anatomy to be able to just draw it freestyle, right? So I'm like,
Right.
okay, I create an elephant that's in the posture I want. And then that goes into my scene, right? But
It's great that
uh,
you can do that.
yeah, but then it just becomes part of the model. But then I paint it. I paint it in a
Right.
very traditional style with, a wash, a monochrome wash, and, under layers of underpainting and glazes and so forth. So because I think you're absolutely right. If you're not creating that piece of work by hand, there's a soul to it that's missing if it
Hmm.
was all just done digitally. And I think, and people are doing amazing things digitally. I'm not knocking it at all, but for me, I would never create a piece of art just digitally and put that out into the world. This is my art. Like, if I don't then paint it in my style, it doesn't have my soul. I don't
Right.
live with
Right.
it and breathe into it like you're talking, like the necklace with the ashes. I don't put my ashes into that piece of art,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I don't,
Yeah.
if I'm not making it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And your style is so photorealistic that respect on any tool that you use, basically.
Yeah.
That is
I
not
I
an
kn-
easy way to paint.
I know.
I struggle. I'm mushy with my paintings, the realistic-ish, but
Yeah.
I seldom paint hands. You'll notice I rarely.
This is one of my most recent paintings. I'm going to read something because it was this quote that birthed his painting. So there's a writer, her name is Jamie Anderson. You may have heard this quote, and it says, "Grief, I've learned, is really just love. It's all the love you want to give but cannot. All the unspent love gathers up in the corners of your eyes, the lump in your throat, and in that hollow part of your chest. Grief is just love with no place to go." This is a story that evolved in my imagination around that idea with this man on this boat. The flowers represent the love, and he doesn't know where to take them. And oftentimes, I think
Oh.
that seems to be the hardest thing about losing someone close to us, assuming, I don't know what your experience is.
Mm.
I've never lost a spouse, but I know when my dad died, there was a period where I felt like, okay, he's gone. Where does all my dad love go? Where is that reciprocity? And it wasn't that long, I would say within the first year, I started communicating with my dad. And like I didn't hear his voice, but I had internal communication with him that I know are real. I know I'm communicating with the spirit and vice versa. So I'm able to feel at times this overwhelming love for me that he has that I receive and vice versa. But I
Mm.
think for most people, when someone is out of sight, we feel like our love doesn't get to them, right? And vice versa. This was the story that came about from this learning for me. And a lot of my paintings oftentimes feel like they're snapshots from a bigger story, like storyboards, for a movie. So there's another painting, if you want to pull it up, it's called The Blue Door. And it's kind of similar. There's a house on an island in the ocean, and there's a boat in the distance.
Okay.
The Blue Door is this painting. So after painting the previous one we were just looking at, I'm like, well, that's like a little bit of a downer. And so I imagine, okay, what's the next chapter in this story? And the same man is in the boat in the distance, but he's rowing up to an island, which the house symbolically usually represents the self. So it represents another person in this storyline. And so he's rowing up to it. And it's the fact that all the lights are off in the house, with the exception of the one up in the upper room, that this is someone else who has gone through a period of grief as well. And the man in the boat is bringing his love to this new in this story, it's a new relationship, right? So he's coming into a relationship with someone else who is also grieved. And so the idea is they're bringing their flowers together to create something new in the wake of their mutual grief. And so this one felt kind of hopeful in that sense. And so, yeah, this was the new story, post grief, I guess you'd call it.
To me, this is like a storybook now, right? I mean, there could be another
Yeah,
painting after this,
right.
but it's so interesting. I haven't seen any of your paintings other than the standalone ones.
Yeah, and there's a few that are kind of stories, and I do think about writing a book and illustrating it. I think at some point I will, but also at the same time, this is kind of this short story, and like, how much do I really want to put into it? How many paintings do I want to make?
Right.
At
Yes.
some point, I'm ready to move on to the next story,
Well, and that's the
Yeah,
other thing about grief too, is that when you're actively pursuing a creative way through it, or at least a mindful way through it, a healthy way through it, at first you can be like, oh my gosh, I want to make my work about helping people grieve. But then eventually you're like, I don't want my whole career to be around grief. It can come back, but it's just, it's a
right.
piece that moves in and out. It's not the whole thing. And when you
Mm-hmm.
become well known for something like that, say you started a podcast, eventually you're like, I'm in a new relationship. I don't really want to talk about grief. So I think it's interesting that you responded in that way.
Yeah. No, that's really well said. And I think with a lot of my work, there's a theme I want to explore a little bit, and then I'll move on to the next one. But there is definitely a lot that keep popping up. Grief and loss and sadness is one of those, just because I encounter so many people in
Mhm.
my world that seem to be experiencing that, and I want to
Hey,
honor that.
what I see in this painting, if I had not seen the first painting, I would see this beautiful house waiting. There's a light on, someone's in there, there's a peacefulness. And whoever's there is waiting, or maybe it's even the person who lives there in the boat is going to get the flowers to plant. Like it's if someone who comes and brings flowers from another place, and that's where all the flowers came from. So this may not be
Mm,
his first time there. It may be his
mhm,
offering to this new relationship.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, yes, exactly to your point. I think this painting could be looked at without grief being a part of it, right? It's just the flowering of a new relationship.
It's
Mm.
another person's perspective, like looking from
Yeah.
another angle. You don't really see the
Yeah.
grievers, you just see the flowers.
Right. Yeah. I like that.
Okay,
I
that's the
like
one
that.
you want to show next.
So there's one more that touches on this subject and it's called Sojourn. This, so talking about my work as it's being called forth from inside of me
Hmm.
from a bigger place, a bigger exterior place. This is one that really, I think that really happened. So I did this painting at a time I worked with hospice for many years. Well, not that many years,
I didn't
maybe four
realize
years
that.
or so. Yeah. My partner at the time, she was a social worker with hospice. This was back in Santa Fe. And she said, "Oh, they're looking for volunteers. Do you want, you want to do this?" So I went through the volunteer training and I ended up being a hospice volunteer and I would be brought into people's homes with someone who was a hospice patient. And sometimes I would read to the patient. Sometimes I would just spend time with them. Sometimes I wasn't even in the room because they didn't want someone else there. I was just in the house when the family needed to get out, for a shopping trip or something. So it really kind of ran the gamut, but I did get to know some people pretty closely, including one woman I spent almost a year with, only supposed to be in hospice for 6 months. And she kept like she would get better and then she would be back on
Yeah,
hospice. And
yeah. Hmm.
which this woman was so delightful. I had a really beautiful experience with her. But this painting came about based on my interpretation of what the release of when someone finally goes is like. I was often there, not often in the room, but often in the house when someone let go, when the family let them go and they finally released their mortal coil, the person who was passing. I swear I could feel it. Like I could feel the difference in this face. And
When somebody walks into a space, why would you not
yeah,
feel it when they're gone?
exactly. So this was my interpretation. So the bubbles represent, there's a flame in each one. I don't know how well you can see it. The bubble with the flame represents the soul in my symbology,
Beautiful.
my symbolic language. And so these bubbles with the souls are basically just drifting off over the sea. They're being released. And I had this painting up at the Laguna Festival of Arts quite a few years back. And I got a call. I wasn't there at the time, but I got a call from a woman in tears saying, I'm standing here in front of this painting, Sojourn, and I need to tell you this story. My mother just died, like I think the day before her mother died. And I was down on Main Beach in Laguna Beach and sitting on the beach looking out at the ocean, just like, missing my mother. And all of a sudden these bubbles started floating past me, like over into the ocean.
Mm.
And it ends up like a little kid was blowing bubbles and they were floating past her. And she's like, I saw those bubbles and I knew this was my mother. My mother was messaging me saying, she's light, she's free. This, it's okay. I'm okay. And I got up, I'm speaking in the woman's voice now, but I got up and started walking. I didn't know where I was going, but I started walking through Laguna Beach. I didn't even know about the Laguna Festival of Arts, but I started walking up the Canyon Road, found myself in front of the Festival of Arts venue, paid my ticket, went in, walked directly to your booth in front of this painting. Like I was just guided to walk here. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what I was doing. And I found myself in front of this painting. And that was one of the most profound things that I've experienced in terms of my work and someone like really connecting with it in a super amazing way.
And not just a person connecting with it. Well, not just a living person connecting with it.
Yes,
Someone that
right.
knew you had made the work.
Mother using my work as a
Mm.
vehicle to communicate with our daughter. It's what are all the pieces that need to
Right.
come together for that thing to happen? It was
And
really
the fact
cool.
that that can happen and that it does happen
Yeah,
is what I would like to focus on here. And you're just lucky enough to get to be there when it happened.
yeah,
Where if you weren't there, you might never know.
yeah,
Doesn't mean
yeah.
a person didn't have the experience.
Right. It was a very cool experience. I was grateful to be used in that way.
So, yeah, it is being used and it is a channel.
Yeah.
Like, I know we're into metaphysics and stuff like that, but I also didn't really know how to talk with the dead until my husband died. And I really relate to this painting because it's like the bubbles become the vessel
Mm.
for the soul to come back in and watch us.
Mhm.
And, you can see it in birds and we see it in butterflies and we see it in little rainbows of sunlight. You could see them as, oh, they're just a phenomenon and it's nature, but there are also something about the timing of it and the meaning of it. It's supernatural. It's extra natural.
Well,
And
I like to think, I guess, when we do cross over, we kind of release our fears and our
Mhm,
limiting beliefs that we adopted in our human form, and
mhm.
we do kind of attain that Buddha nature. Um, I hope.
And then the water also, just the great unconscious of it all and the ebb and the flow of it. And that was in the other two paintings. Is that a symbol that you use a lot in your work?
I use the ocean a lot for a couple reasons. One is, yes, the symbolic element. Water typically in its most basic symbolic form, represents our emotions. So these paintings have an emotional element, but I also, growing up near the ocean, I just love looking at it and I love using it as a stage for certain things. And oftentimes things are reflected in the ocean in my paintings. And so there's that whole symbolic element too. And I spend a lot of time in the ocean. I surf a lot, so I'm in the water a lot. It's been a healing element
It
in
is
my life.
healing, yeah. I
Yeah.
did a lot of swimming after Vernon died. I wasn't really a swimmer, but it just
Yeah.
always go in there.
Interesting.
It was like the bubbles, and I was sort of between worlds,
Yeah.
and that between world place felt more real to me. And I think that time in hospice also for me was so profound. I'm really interested that you do the hospice work because I know it's different for different people. But Vernon was on, I think, for like 3 weeks. It
Mm.
was supposed to be like 8 days. Maybe it was 2 weeks. I don't know. It was longer. And after a while, it was like, come on. But what was so fascinating about it all was because he was basically off life support. So uh, he was just going to die unnatural. Like it was his kidneys. And then you'd give him the morphine.
Hmm.
I wouldn't give him the morphine. Somebody would give him the morphine. Somebody that's supposed to. And he would kind of like go, and you just think that was it. Like maybe he's just going to die in his sleep. And then he came back, and it was like, oh, he's back. Okay. You go through this. Oh, are we grieving yet? Is
Yeah.
this it? Oh, did we say enough? Did I tell him I loved him? Like, oh, did we ask for signs and all these things? We did ask for signs, which was the coolest because we had time to do that.
Mm.
So then I got really into like finding pigeons everywhere. But that was the beginning of me learning to talk to those who had passed.
Yeah.
I'd already lost people and I didn't know how to talk to them, like my
Mm.
grandmother. And then I learned, and now I just talked to my grandfather. He's just a picture of him right here, hanging out with him lately.
Well,
So now I know. But anyway,
yeah.
the hospice thing was I was blogging about it and letting people know what was going on so they could follow the story. And he would kind of like go to sleep and we weren't quite sure. His breathing would just get real shallow. And then I'd hear from someone saying, I just heard Vernon's favorite song that I never hear. And then I saw a double rainbow at the same time in the place that he used to go. Weird things would happen.
Mm.
But I just felt that sense of him. Then he'd come back in the room and he'd be like, oh, what's up? We're like, oh, he's back. And it went up and down like that.
Wow.
And it was so fascinating because it was the beginning of me learning, oh, he's saying goodbye. And it was like those bubbles were already beginning. Like he somewhere
Mm.
was in England and somebody else heard this song in Australia. And we were all connected to this man that was dying because we were given this period of time to
Yeah.
experience it. And that I think is so different than when somebody has an accident and then that's it.
Right. Right. Right.
It it's not such a prolonged grief while you're in it. There's no
Yeah.
ambiguous grief in the middle, but I know that, there are a lot of times they have to make peace on their own with what they didn't say.
Yeah. Wow. What an experience.
And that's the thing is it's so sad what happened. But the I don't know, the awareness, the expansion of possibility, um,
Mhm.
magical gifts. uh,
Yeah.
telepathy, who knows if it's even real, but it's a way of responding to life with more expansion.
Mm,
And I don't know if I could do that before I fully agreed to some things.
yeah. I heard someone share years and years ago that we would be at a time, and I think some people are already doing this. There are people who can sit with someone who's dying and go into a meditative state and journey with them to the other side. When I first heard that, I got chills and I'm like, oh my God, that's what a beautiful service, you know.
I think that's what you're doing with your paintings, though.
Maybe, I think a little bit.
You're
Yeah.
doing it in a way that's more static.
Yeah. And I think I spend a lot of time thinking I spend a lot of time thinking about death in the sense that never want to forget that my time here is finite. I never want to take it for granted. I still do at times, but I'm getting better with it. You know, my wife had breast cancer. It was caught early, but there was a period of time where we didn't know what we were dealing with. And I ended up creating a painting, and we can actually share this. It's called In Between Here and Not Here. Yeah, so I wrote this poem about what if this person had disappeared from my life, you know? Pretty sure it was George Harrison that spent a good part of his life post Beatles. He said he was preparing for his good death. He spent a good part of his existence being prepared to die. And I thought that was so fascinating. I don't know that I'm ready to go that far, but do you mind if I
Yes,
read
please
the
do.
poem that goes
And can you see
with
the
this?
picture?
I can see the picture. Yeah.
Oh, it's just for those who haven't seen it. It's like three giant stones, kind of stacking stones, giant oak tree looking at the top, and a very cool, almost like a Japanese style. Uh,
It's like a little hut. Yeah.
yeah, and a ladder that
And
goes way, 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 way down into the clouds, like a Jack and the
yeah.
Beanstalk.
The idea is that like this is in the heavens, right? It's above the clouds. So think about the heavenly realm, if you will, as an analogy. So here's the poem that I wrote that goes with it. In between here and not here. If you were to die before me, I would find a piece of real estate in between heaven and earth where I'd build a little shelter like the ones hikers use on long mountain trails. There we could spend nights together. And if you were so inclined, I'd let you cradle my newborn sadness. Out of the storm of my grief, you would tell me stories about why I shouldn't be in a hurry to follow and feed me with knowing words that it's all okay, all divine, that you left with everything you came for and more. With coffee flavored kisses, you would thank me for the sweetness I gave to your life, and you'd make me stay, and I'd make you stay until the dawn was certain, until night had poured out the last of its darkness. When I awoke again, the smell of you in our sheets would confirm that it wasn't just a dream, that you were waiting for us in the shelter I built in between here and not here. So that was my ode to my wife's cancer and my gratefulness that she is fine at this point. But one of us is going to go before the other, probably. I don't want to be totally caught by surprise if that ends up being her or me. But I also honor that none of us leave until we're done whatever we came here to do. Sometimes that's as an infant, you know, for some souls. So
Not even
yeah,
as far as an infant in some.
maybe right, maybe in utero, sure. And
Mhm.
some just come to dip a toe in and spawn something in the parents that they've all agreed that needs to happen in this lifetime, you know. And so I'd like to think I'm able to look at life and dying in that way. Not that I'm not going to maybe fall apart the next time someone in my life leaves that I wasn't anticipating, you know?
If you do fall apart, that's the way the grief needs to be. Because sometimes when you fall apart, you get through it faster.
Yeah, yeah, I would imagine. I mean, you know
It was like having
more
a
than
child to get all that stuff out.
yeah, right. Well, yeah, I guess along that line, I think it's only a negative if we wallow in that grief for a really extended period of time and don't live our lives as a result, right? I mean, that's what I imagine.
But you're also spending your time creating a reality in these paintings.
Yeah,
No, it is a reality. It's the reality that's on that canvas. The reality that you were actually feeling. That's this new idea that's come forward to
yeah,
comfort people.
yeah.
And by your dwelling on the afterlife and how do we break these attachments and all of that, the peace that's on these paintings, the way you talk about them isn't as peaceful as the way I look at them. You
Mhm.
know what I'm saying? I love talking to artists because you get to hear what really is going on in there. Anxiety that you would have been feeling if your wife was possibly going to die, and how do I prepare myself for this? So let me make it. Let's do this together where you can see where we're going to meet. It's like when Vernon and I talked about what sign you're going to give him, and he's like, pigeon. And I'm like, oh, okay, pigeon, that's a thing. Okay, what are you going to give the kids? And we were able to have something like a code. Whoever dies first with you guys, and hopefully, that's not for a long, long time. The other one will know this picture is where you're going to meet.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're not out there floundering looking for your soulmate. You know where to go.
Yeah.
And you know how we say in different lifetimes, sometimes you make contracts with people to meet them at a certain time. Who knows if we go that far in it, but there's some kind of purpose in it. And then you do. And sometimes we read more into it than necessary, but there's this fulfillment of something that was planned
Mm.
here at this time, or I'm going to be born into this family or whatever. And then I don't see why that wouldn't happen, why we can't make it happen consciously.
Yeah.
Because we don't remember doing it in other lifetimes or wherever that comes from, doesn't mean we can't consciously make it happen for the future.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can take the mystery out of what it is to die and the fear out of it. And I think the bottom line is like, that's what I'm doing for myself. Right. I mean, I'm doing it hopefully as a service to other people that connect with my work.
We're
Yeah.
always going to be working for ourselves first, and then comes transpersonal, which going back to the very beginning of all this is it's okay to be someone that maybe puts more emphasis on those thoughts, sadness, and holding space for people who haven't really been able to do it for themselves. I mean, this is what reparations are about.
Mm.
I know that your family deserved more honor for things that were treated shamefully or taken from you in the past, and we want to recognize that. You suffered unnecessary grief, and I see that and I honor that. And to me, that's like the rebuilding.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. The acknowledgement of it, the foundation of the rebuilding. Yeah.
It's how we get through it and how we use it. Some people will use it for constant bypassing. Other
Mm.
people will over think about it, like they're never going to let go of that attachment. And then there's just us that hopefully we're like, how do I take this and make it something manageable?
Yeah.
I know I'll make something. And I think as long as we're creating, we're bringing new life from the ashes. And back to the Sinisternum card, the idea of the ashes of something being put back into the earth, like a fertilizer of sorts.
Hmm.
Do you remember where we first met was at the San Clemente Art Supply?
I do remember.
And there was a beautiful rose garden. It's just
Hmm.
beautiful. I think Richard had put a lot of them in. Well, in the past, that building was a mortuary.
Oh,
Yeah, I
interesting.
think the back area where the classrooms were,
Yeah.
I think that was where the morgue was.
Wow.
So we used to make a joke of why the flowers were so resplendent
Wow.
there because
Oh,
the drain
that all
off
makes
from whatever they were washing.
right. The ashes. That makes perfect sense.
So the
Wow.
ashes being like everything's been brought down to
Yeah.
something that can even be blown away or turned into a diamond, or buried.
Mm.
But we don't get to have the mass of the person.
Yeah.
And in the end, they're not
Well,
really even dust. That's just the residue. What they are is the thing that was in them the whole time when the spirit left the body and when the spirit
yeah.
came in. Finally got to circle around to the alchemy.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad to have had this conversation with you because I've also been following what you do in the world. And, I know cursory about your story with Vernon and just seeing how you have alchemized, how you've transmuted all that you've gone through into so many beautiful, profound things that you create and bring into the world.
Right? I want to see more beauty in the world. And well, I guess I got to make it.
Yeah, someone's got to do it, right?
Someone's got to do it.
And by the way, my art, for people who are maybe just seeing and learning about me for the first time, there's a lot of my art that is whimsical and light,
Yeah.
and it's not all about this. So
We're going to
yeah.
share your website and you
Okay.
shows here and there.
I have a gallery in Maui that represents my work, the Lahaina Gallery in Maui.
Is Lahaina, is it still going?
They moved before the Lahaina burnt,
Oh,
so they're in a different part of the island. So fortunately, they were okay.
I'm going to be
Um,
in Maui in a couple months.
okay, just look up Lahaina Gallery. You'll find them. They're in Wailea. I think it's the town that they're in. I have some original work there and some of my prints. It's a cool gallery. It's a cool family. It's, I think, the oldest family owned gallery, and certainly in Hawaii, but one of the oldest in the US. Really nice people. I have some work at the Ritz-Carlton in Dana Point. I curate a space there. So I have some of my work of some other artists there.
Oh, I should talk
Um,
to you about that. I'm gonna get my stuff in.
yeah, let's talk about that.
Okay.
I have some work in there. Some of my prints are there's a gallery in the mall, the shops at Mission Viejo. There's a gallery there. They've got a few pieces, and then I co-run a gallery here in Costa Rica with some partners, and we represent 30 artists, a lot of Costa Rican artists that don't have a place to show their work. The arts are not really celebrated here like they are in Mexico, for example, and certain other countries. It's really unfortunate. I think people focus on the natural beauty here, and it is a work of art, but people's art doesn't get the same level of focus. So, and then, my website, I do
A lot of sloth paintings there.
Laos off and Tucan's paintings,
Yeah.
which I've done. And there's some on my website, but they're bringing those animals into a fanciful way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe we can have another conversation next year about the animals. I think that would be really, really cool.
I would like that.
Okay. Great,
Yeah.
great, great. Thank you so much for your time
My
today.
pleasure. Thank you,
Yeah,
Allison.
thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Okay. All right. Ciao.
Bye bye.